It's not the accomplishments that matter. It's not the resume that matters. It's the whole life resume that matters.
John, what do you think of the saying, we all have one true passion?
I would say that saying is incomplete. A more complete expression would be, we all have at least one true passion. In just thinking about my life, my understanding of my controlling idea, my one true passion, has changed over time. And broadly speaking, I would say my passion set equally inhabits writing and teaching. So my one true passion is comprised of two true passions. I think one true passion limits the conversation.
And did you grow up with the idea that there was just one, quote, true sort of thing that you knew you should devote your life to? Or is this something that you'd been exposed to early on?
You know, it's funny, since we met last, among other things, I did a thought experiment. I wrote a memoir called John Vorhaus Year by Year. And the challenge of it was to describe every year of my life to no more than one paragraph. The first years are easy. 1955, don't remember. 1956, don't remember. 1957, vague memories of cheese. But at a certain point, I start to get into my teen years, for instance, and look at who I was and what I felt at the time. And one thing that struck me as I reflected was I had this sense that I wanted to be big in the world. I didn't really know what that meant, but I just knew that I desired that thing. I didn't even articulate it around, oh, I want to be an actor or a writer or an artist or anything, just known, I think. And that idea, then as I reflected on my 20s, I realized that that teen idea was kind of a burden to me, because there I was in my 20s being not known and feeling like I was letting down an earlier version of myself, a 13, 14-year-old version of myself. Looking back on all of this, I reflect and I realize neither of those versions of myself had the self-understanding that I have. And the 13-year-old didn't have the self-understanding that the 20 or 25-year-old had. So whatever expectations we had when we were younger, they're built on a platform of imperfect understanding of the self and imperfect understanding of the world. So they must naturally undergo change as we undergo growth. I just made up a word.
Yeah,
as
I like
we
it.
undergrow.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's good. Did you know why you wanted to be known?
Another self-truth that was revealed through this exercise was when I was that age, elementary school, middle school, high school, two things were always true. One was arguably true, if not absolutely true. I was always the smartest kid in the class, if not the smartest among the smartest. And there's no arrogance on my part to say so. They labeled us at the time. You guys go into the super smart class. The other thing that was inarguably true, I was always the shortest kid in the class. And so being the smartest and the shortest endowed me with a feeling I later came to identify as arrogant insecurity. And so I think this desire to be known in the world was a desire to have my status propped up and validated by as many people as possible. I would say that's where the desire to be big in the world came from. As I started flexing my creative muscles, though, I came to understand what I really want to do is communicate ideas. And I had this as early as, let's say, 25. At the age of 25, I stopped working as an advertising copywriter and started being a singer-songwriter, singing and playing guitar like Bob Dylan. And I made that choice because I understood that if I wrote a song and then played it to an audience, I was creating an information bridge. I was taking ideas in my head, encoding those ideas into song lyrics and music, transmitting them by singing and playing them. And they would be received by other people who would then decode that information or those lyrics and that music into information in their brain. So from the age of young adulthood at least, and possibly much earlier than that, I was always interested in the idea of getting my ideas out of my head and into your head and their head. And so one might say that if I succeeded in being big in the world, I would succeed in being impactful and doing a fulsome job of getting the ideas out of my brain and into your brain.
Okay. And did you have trouble with the paragraphs when you went through each year? Did you find yourself having to, shrink down the paragraph? It was too long?
I didn't have to do anything except end the paragraph because this wasn't really a project for publication. And one of the things that I was working on and conscious of was there are no good paragraphs or bad paragraphs. There's no good or bad part of my story. There's only the part of the story that I choose to signify the events of that year. So if I was having trouble honing content, boiling down content, that just meant that I hadn't finished editing it to my satisfaction. But there was never any sense of, oh, it should be longer or shorter or better or worse or different. I just let the material be what it was. I have pretty full historical record to draw upon. My mother, God love her, saved all of my report cards and a ton of my letters home. So for the early years, up to my mid-20s or so, I have my mother's historical record because all of that paperwork came to me eventually. So I could reflect on and review my past just by going back to the sources. From my mid-20s, I had journals to draw upon, and then from the mid-1990s, I had hard drives to draw upon. So it wasn't really hard to access information about the past. It was hard to identify what part of the life experience of any given year was a meaningful inflection point to the point that I would want to put my focus on that discussion at that time. There was a lot of personal pull from me to credential myself. Like I wanted to, this is the year I wrote for Married with Children, and this is the year that I wrote for Charles in Charge, as if there was some imaginary reader to whom it would matter a great deal about when I stroked the major accomplishments of my life. But as someone who has lived through the major accomplishments of my life, I'm now much more at home with the idea of it's not the accomplishments that matter, it's not the resume that matters, it's the whole life resume that matters. And the difference is the resume is the jobs you hold, but the whole life resume is the things that you do that you look back on in reflection and say, those were the things that made my life worth living. Those were the things that I can identify as high points or turning points or inflection points in my life.
I feel like all of us could benefit from this, looking at our life by each year and writing a paragraph. Have you suggested this to other people in your classes?
I have. I now include it as extra credit homework in classes. One might say I don't ever look at the outcomes, but I do encourage people to do it. Corollary, in all of my classes, I always tell people between now and tomorrow, do something you've never done before. So although my classes are mostly writing classes, I am also thinking about how to make the experience more transcendent for the people who are in it. To your question, if I had it to do over again, I would have loved to take this on in my 20s and build it throughout my entire life. And for young people watching, for you kids at home, try it. Start doing a summary, a year by year of anything you've done up to this point, and then plan on adding to it year over year. If nothing else, it will be a robust record of the life you've lived. And one thing I've learned as I've gotten older is you like to have those records because you can't necessarily trust the old memory. A pitfall that one will encounter is expectation. I'm writing my memoir that seems to carry a lot of weight. People will think things like, I haven't lived enough life to be worthy of a memoir. I haven't done enough important things to be worthy of a memoir. I won't write well enough to do justice to my story. And all of these things can be addressed with the controlling idea, whatever you write, it can't be more than a paragraph. And since you know it can't be more than a paragraph, you don't put that burden of expectation on it. That's the thing that I would remember. In a situation like this, there are no good outcomes or no bad outcomes. There's just outcomes. It's just a thought experiment that you can have with yourself to deepen your understanding of yourself and your relationship with yourself, which is the job of everybody in the long run.
Sure. One final thing to add, though, have you had people then write paragraphs about a certain year and it uncovered things they didn't want to remember?
I can certainly imagine that happening. I had that experience myself. I'm going to answer that question quite obliquely. I told you that I do this exercise, do something you've never done before. And people all over the world treat that differently. In one particular instance, a woman had a challenging conversation with her ex-husband for the first time. And when she reported on the engagement, she said it was not easy and not 100% good, but worthwhile. So I would say that anybody who sits down to confront themselves honestly will discover things about themselves that they might not feel immediately comfortable with. Rather than freak out and take it out on the person who suggested the exercise, I would propose a different strategy, which is to understand that that moment of uncovering a truth and having a strong emotional reaction to it, that's an opportunity to work on one's awareness and acceptance, in the simple sense that I am aware that I've written something that revealed something to be about myself that I'm finding challenging. And then acceptance, whatever the thing is that I just discovered, I can accept it as a part of myself, if for no other reason than it has just been revealed to me to be a part of myself. I don't have to assign a value judgment to it. I don't have to say that's a good or a bad part of myself. It's just a revealed truth. So that will allow someone to allow themselves to make discoveries in these little paragraphs, and then have a way of accepting the, let's call it, the negative aspects of those discoveries.
Yeah, I could see where it could uncover things that you maybe don't want to remember, but yeah.
It's worth. I don't have a bad past.
Oh,
I don't have trauma in my past. So a lot of my approach to this exercise, I kind of feel like I'm playing with the house's money. I'm operating in a space where I feel very comfortable, that is, inside myself. But I recognize that other people's life experiences are different, and especially a lot of people have had trauma that I can't even imagine. And so I would say that this exercise is worthwhile, but for some people, probably not without risk, and so it should be treated with respect.